But for me, personally, I would like to remember here we have Martina, also another champion of civic enlightenment and education and life. She joined us from Poland, but this is not so much about this, it's because we are together. What I want to say here, actually I would like this class, this community which is attending the class, federal class in Golitsyno, should meet some people. People who not only understand but also make this country more modern. Not better, not for the worse, not richer, but certainly not poorer, because there is creativity about it all. But they make the country more modern, because life is for all of us forever, has been and will be and is a very sophisticated matter, but helping this complexity and sophistication of life, and helping this complexity to resolve, and not only in statehood ways, but in ways that are needed so that the country should stay alive, and again, I would use this word again, modern. I know that now they've announced a code that we revoke of this nation from the past, certainly. In every person's biography very much, in any country and every nation, the past is a fundamental part of our life. But life is going on right now and right here. And each of us, as I think, life wants from us and requires from us some active involvement and participation. So for some people, this activity, this active participation, is both about their self-fulfillment and about freedom, for which they're paying with their own responsibility. So I would like to say that here we are introducing to you our expert, who will be introducing her model civic project, Svetlana Makovetskaya, and so I'm grateful to her, because it's to fly from Bern and then return from Bern. It really is difficult, but I wanted her to attend, and we invited her so cordially so that the country should, as foreign countries, Martina, so that the country should know our heroes. Yes, the country should know our heroes, and maybe many of you might think this project more interesting, or you are developing something similar at home, or you are listening to Svetlana's presentation and you maybe co-participate in her project. I do not know how it will work. But what I want to tell you is, this is great that she allowed herself, given this unbearable heat, when people lose their minds, to travel here to attend this 2-hour lecture and then travel back. Thank you. I want to say that it was my pleasure to travel, because we had plus 12 degrees centigrade during July, so I think the temperature and the heat you are living through is a bonus for me. I have a very strange name of my presentation, civic pragmatism, but I want us to talk about it, because here I play the role of local optimist, and this is the case. I actually think that the mission of Russian representative intelligentsia, the person who thinks about something, is to be successful. How to be successful in a situation where when you think that everybody has gone mad, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? This is what I shall talk here. Although I am from Perm, about the Center of Independent Analysis, but amongst other things, I am studying many other civic practices in Russia, and I will discuss them too. And I've prepared for you some thematic story about whether in Russia do we have any space where, again, what is in great demand and very successful, our civic practices. May I begin as I listened to what Irina had to say, and I find that it really agrees with me. But at that, I immediately remember that once upon a time, when was it? So when I was 20 years ago, I talked to my mother, and my mother is just like a tank of battle. She is a very big leader on one of the defense plants. And when things fail, people get depressed and they upset and they lie facing the ceiling and they feel languid. They say, what are you doing at this time? I said, don't know. I am washing the floor. And she says, look at your wrists. Are they thin? No, they are peasants. Peasant nature. When things go bad, you must do something. Must be active. Not so much about opposing the what we call blue blood to the peasant blood. No, there is a very right state of mind where you realize that at a certain time you need to turn the reality that is something you dislike as a resource and turn yourself into a resource within this reality. At a certain time, you should oppose the point of it all to the result, because it may well be that the civic product, the specific outcome, civic success at any given unit of time might be more important. Why am I saying it? Because recently we have seen gross radicalization on the both sides, and I feel a hostage. On the one side and on the other side, I can see people whom I respect so much allow themselves a rhetoric which says that they do not think that our people matter. On the other side, I realize that I cannot be hostage those people who are probably overexcited over the game of triumph of will. And in this situation, like Grigory Melikhov, I'm looking for the third alternative pathway. And although this is not a situation, this is the situation we found ourselves in. Firstly, I think one should stick to the big style. Russia is independent. Russia is independent and Russia is independent and self-sufficient. It's a country that values free, loving country, practices more than it values the rhetoric. Russia that at any given point in time can maybe once when we switched on during 24 hours or during a month, create something that doesn't depend on anything, some public good. So please remember, this is amazing. Radicals, I'm telling you, this is my method. We don't have anybody who belongs to our idea, because rhetorical radicalization dehumanizes us, turns us into cannon fodder. I do not want to be cannon fodder, because Russia is our chance, and I'm absolutely convinced of that we are a great country with a great culture, where we can have a great fate. And this greatness at any certain point of time has helped people understand their responsibility before what is going on here. People who abandon, very much like in Stalker, they throw a nut into the future and then they crawl or go and walk there. They send it forward or send it back. Much depends upon the choice. And when I started thinking about it, I thought it was just a case of modernism. Sorry for using these buzzwords. In a sense that this is pragmatism, when the outcome, the result matters very much, when it's very important, so that the civil society and civil specialists, experts, activists and values and so on should create real product, real outcome, so that they should create the usefulness, so that the working model that they want from anybody else, so that they should try and look, what does it mean to grow to be as high as your rival? As I say it, in pragmatism, people turn into a resource by changing at all times. No, we can't take this road. Okay, we made a U-turn and we go further. As Ksenia Sobchak, when she was in a role play, she said, life is short. I won't do it because I haven't read all Tolstoy. Indeed, I haven't read all Tolstoy. I have only one life. So at some point, can I turn myself into a resource, which, as I think, is needed for the future? This is my responsibility, but this responsibility, it's a new type, how shall I put it, solidarity, joint activity. And this is, if you will, if you will, possibility to shake our shoulders. We probably went too deep into the game because I was program director of the project Future of Civil Rights in Russia. We are now playing too much in symbolic games. I'm again shrugging my shoulders, not shaking, certainly shrugging my shoulders again. If the results of activity we produce statements that nobody responds to, I shrug my shoulders. What's the point of all this? Not why, because of what did we need to make these statements, but why? Why on earth? Do we need to change things which we interact with? And this attempt to maximize our interaction with reality, this attempt at being technological, this is something that belongs to civic pragmatism. For me, at this time, this is something like, it's not an ideology, because it is not, and it is some kind of thematic packaging of non-alignment. Non-alignment. I want it to be this way, that as many people as they can remain human, remain citizens, should produce freedom-containing practices and should be aware about who is making it, what is doing it, so that they should forget that all happens from the state, and all troubles they happen from the state, and all the good happens for them from the state. We want it the other way around. And this requires special sensitivity. I can feel those narratives, this early conception. I realize that somebody wants to use me. Okay, I turn away and I go away. It doesn't mean that I'm tolerant towards anything, no. There are some instruments of contempt, but does it mean that, like, when somebody in your presence, say, somebody humiliates a passenger who is a bit drunk? Well, contempt for me is just being very calm and very quietly say, just, you humiliated somebody at this very time. This is something that shouldn't be done. When you saw something happening, some law has been adopted without any hatred towards civil officials, because it's my apparatus amongst others. You did the wrong thing, you did unproductively, you were not professional. You will have to redo it, and I know how to redo it. This is part and parcel of pragmatism that matters a lot to us. If we find out that at this time we have to finally abandon this weakness, when the world is perceived like, on the one side, we see something clad in iron and concrete, and on the other side, diverse, though not that firm civil society. It is not so. At any special moment in time, this civil society is all the practices and responsibility. Any citizen, maybe government official, who goes beyond his professional requirements and job description. Or at a certain time we lose our civic field because NGOs suddenly started to defend themselves and became a victim and forgot that there are other public interests. They're only working for their own protection. At this certain point in time, the number of civic in our life is going down. In the same way with the state, as I see it. Never before. I've never seen as many suggestions resetting public councils. This doesn't work. I met Boris Grozovsky at an open government when we realized the problem of understandability. What do you think? What I mean, the executive. Suddenly they thought, what does it mean to... So that what they do should be understandable. Is it good? Is it bad? It's good. It's normal for the public interest. But we realized that in point of time, they want to either push forward the advertisement, and in the long run they won't get it all done. But we are carriers of incredible civic success. Moscow-Helsinki technology. Please raise your hands, those who treated Helsinki agreements as something that made any sense. But they turned it into normal resource and say, okay, we shall monitor whether they comply or not comply. In the same way right now, it's very important to raise in yourself, to educate in yourself, a readiness to stimulate productivity anywhere we can. This is what we need. Professional government official, professional modern state governance. I belong to the collegium of the College of Open Government, and I'm also about public governance. It implies, amongst other things, that he should interact with a vast number of stakeholders and others. But why don't they interact? Because they're firmly convinced that on the other side they will see just three sisters and Dядя Vanya, Council of Veterans, maybe some other Afghanistan, and maybe some liberal professor who doesn't know how this life works, growing our own power. At a time when you see even hypothetical possibility to promote our public interests, any attempt to master this language, this practice, to change things, at least to give it a try. I think this is the right thing to do, and it fits naturally into my idea about what it is. What is it? Civic practicism, but at that not accept nasty practices and insulting limit. What is famous about Perm? Somebody, Ozan, said that we are the capital of civil society. Certainly went a bit overboard, but what is special about Perm, about NGOs? We would immediately do something and do it evaluation and monitoring, and then we described it as a technology. We are absolutely nuts about technologies. We described them. We had civic negotiations where they would shut the door, and before the government officials and civic society people sign something, they wouldn't be able to open the door. This was a reality. If you see an imitation, it's a mock sort of interaction, and they put you somebody, a clerk who has no my big position, then you may leave, amongst other things, because you can always show, this is what we show, this style. And to us, you must grow to work with us as rivals. We are very successful because we lose our time. We spend our time on this. We invest our time on this. When somebody says, because I cannot talk to my relatives about Ukraine, Crimea, everybody seems to go mad. We quite certainly understand that their future and the future of my daughter and so on and so forth depends on how many knots we can untie. We've already put our kids into the depth, and we continue digging further. They are getting deep. So my objective is to untie at least one knot that I see. Then please look, another example. There is a bill about basic social services, social welfare. Could be honest, social welfare services is something that I'm very far from them. Well, I do not know much about it, but I understand that something new is happening there. The bill has sent 88 different addresses saying, guys, tomorrow, if you can, if the minister could respond, please, very fast and make some amendments. So at 8 o'clock at night, we get from the office we leave at 2 o'clock at night, we wrote something and sent it. It turned out that we were the only ones who responded, the only ones. That was actually introduced into the bill. Now they have this situation about kids who were left orphans and with neglected kids. What is some special feat that we did? No, it was just regular plain hard work. We were exceptionally technological, and I think it's very important to be technological, to be modern in that sense of the word, and give an example of how it works, so that the civil society and institutions of civil society and NGOs and on the other side show that there can be normal partners but change. Moreover, they quite surely add common sense into any reform. I know it for sure, because this is the place of all liberal reforms that could be done. They all followed in this country. Almost all are going to curtailed right now because you cannot modernize from the top. Somebody should become a partner. We need visionaries, missionaries, agents of change, people who believe that reforms happen not because it occurred to somebody, but there are problems that need to be addressed. And the sense, we're losing time, we're leaving it for kids to resolve. We'll make them not successful, they will all stand to lose. This is what pragmatists, as I think, in any way is there. Then about weeping. Weeping, it's just this rumor. Well, pragmatists, do they like weeping? Civic pragmatists like this thing. If there's something upset you, post a text. one of the serious problems, it's not so much about dehumanization of our rhetoric, but that we lost what can be told civic society and church tradition and church laws. All of this was written in other times for very different reasons, so we cannot find much what we can do. Okay, those tales about this traditional Russian, well, I don't remember things that we used to tell in the pioneer camp. They looked at the bloody anti-popular regime and whatever. There is nothing new. Please come up with something new so that it could be used. Well, finally, pragmatism, it's about practicing civic attitude. It's practicing civic attitude. You produce concrete services. You, I don't know, you help people, you create something new, you give examples which can later be used. You do something else, but this is appeal for technology and somewhat technologization. But why am I saying so? Because the basis of pragmatism is firm convention that civic feat is fine, but it's like something that you used once and then it's gone. But civic activity, this is en masse production of something civic, about public interest. This should be produced at all times, and this production, this is something where we need technology. What is it that they're going to do? Are going to do expertise, assessment and evaluation of the regulating impact, monitoring, or maybe other texts that you would produce, like slow media, because we need quality information. Whether you shall carry out research, it doesn't really matter at all. Why am I a fan of technologies? I find even some pleasure in it. Well, everybody keeps telling some about historic books. I also remember this historic book. There's a historic book about, and it was written in antiquity. It's called Anabasis. I don't know if you're aware of this. Like some ancient Greek militants, as they found themselves in Persia, and as they were left, they were hirelings and they didn't have any commission, so they returned back. Through this loose Persia that opposed to Greece, there were, I don't remember how many thousand people, I don't remember it exactly. I didn't want to give you this example. This is something that just came to my mind. They traveled through this loose Persia, at that time non-technological. They traveled like knife through butter, losing 2 or 3 people. Why? Because they had a phalanx. One person is responsible for defending, he's holding the shield and covering himself, and somebody else standing next to him. This phalanx, there's feeling that they're supported, that they're doing some joint solidary action, and knowing that you belong to some group, and it's more than your amour propre and ego. I suppose they keep saying, stand still. Retain common sense, retain productivity, try not to generate enemies where you could have allies, and again, try to defend common sense, common civic sense, some specific actions, specific activities. What else did I want to say about civil pragmatism? I wanted to speak about relations with the government and relations with the business. Independent business, it's part and parcel of civic culture and civil society. And we certainly need independent business. We should praise it, support it, and in every way, I don't know, promote its independence. At the same time, our attitude towards and our relations with the government, it's pure design. There's no affection, there is no hatred. You may have noted that in the last 2 years we are facing a situation when civic communities once again and again see new self-organization. This is people who have become conservative, archaic organization, and so on. This is self-organization because they indeed are people who perceived a new phenomena related to internet and public democracy on sites as something, as a threat to their identity, as a threat to the country, which they perceive very much in a very acute manner. So this is where we see new self-organization. When in the street we saw a huge number of cannibalist practices. Cannibalist, I call these practices, will allow, for example, as a tool that can humiliate somebody else. May it be a stop harm or, I don't know, this is just an initiative, or initiative against smokers, when they, or Hryushi or others, Cossacks who sometimes would pull a girl by her hair. I think it's cannibalist practices, but it's also self-organization. So when we speak about diversity, about our civil activity, why don't we give a chance to show diversity to those who are, so to say, oppose us? This is the government officials, God forbid. I don't want to deify them. Sometimes I don't want to give them any chance to be ahead of me. But the problem is that at a certain time we may need these triangles of common sense. People who are ready to see partners in their opponent, somebody who would oppose these cannibalist practices. Cannibalists in society and in government, there are in a lot. And we shall have to find this local optimum of interest. And this needs to be done. And this has to do with pragmatism. And finally, one of the most serious things which I wanted to discuss with you, so much about pragmatists should know how to show gratitude. Being grateful when they make use of the outcome of somebody else's work. What is good about Moscow School of Political Activity, what I like about it, and I want to repeat it, we found it easier to ascend because time was flying with our wings, but say for people who are now trying to rise when they're over 30, because the wind is in the opposite direction, and I want to thank those who turn into a resource, who help them rise, because what is going on? They try to create here very rare earth resource in Russia, public career without going into government, public career, public expertise, public civil society, public administrative career that would be basing itself upon context, upon respect, high presence in public sphere. I think it's very important. But on the other side, we should say that sometimes you make use resources from somebody else whom you do not like.
And certainly our resources are not limitless. We should realize that. And we have some negative incentives. We always know that the government bodies are wrong, and they are wrong always, just by definition. I used to experience myself very negative sensations. Are there any members of the EU-Russia Forum? Well, it is divided into a human rights activist section and environmental protection sections and social care section. And then there was a resolution, a radical resolution that was voted for. And those who were not radical enough said cautiously that perhaps we had to read it first and discuss it first. And then conflict erupted, so the society splits into those who believe that, tentatively speaking, the Russian state is so black that only black colors can be used. And there are others claiming Russia to be properly white. And we have a lot of people who experience problems with law enforcement bodies, with the government and non-profit NGOs. Among them, my NGO last year won 4 trials. We proved to the prosecution that we were not foreign agents. And then I said that at this meeting, I asked to get up those who had received grants from the Russian Federation government. And then the situation was terrible for me. I was blamed to be a wife of the KGB agent since I dared speaking of that. And I thought it only right to speak about that unbalanced structure with the carrots and sticks, and I thought it only right to see what are the carrots and what are the sticks, and if we do not do so, we do not see the reality. Self-responsibility, I commented on already, and pragmatism, self-pragmatism is self-responsibility, and we have confused with social obligations. If you have money, ask your parents not to use free services, come with them to private clinics. If you see those mini banks that offer a lot of lending to you, you should realize that all those vicious practices will not end good, and those things are also to be dealt with, and it's also in the civic interest. That's a separate topic for the agenda. But I can repeat, but they look like mantras, and here a person can be happy. And if I'm doing a career working in Perm, and would be my provincial response and answer to the decentralization of Russia. But I would like to turn your attention to the fact that, just a moment, that there are some platforms where repeatedly independent Russia is seen more frequently than anywhere else. It's coming. So let's talk about a modern city as a civic project. I like this topic. When we started the Russian political activism for the past 2 years and a half, we discovered a number of very interesting phenomena that are quite obvious. Those are the civic activities of artful subcultures. It's the civic activities of marginal political structures. It's also information and communication technologies with a specificity in the area of civic activities, mass social creative arts, and I think here we can find a representative Lisa Island, and it's a very important example of social activity. Well, my point is that it's the line not at the level of the grassroots. It's the right thing they came up with. We thought that it's the state that is the decisive factor, that it's the state that produces and manufactures everything, but probably it has played already a role and is disappearing in the past. That's all European trend. Probably we'll be speaking later about the Europe of cities, not the Europe of countries. And those builders of various verticals will come to deal with cities' problems very late, and they are dealing with municipal problems, but it's not the city as an organization. So the freedom of art is still alive in the walls, inside the walls of a city, because it's still our city. And it's not my song, and it's not. I'm a social economist in a certain way. But even lighthouses were built not by the state, so we'll need to switch to Plan B. It's useless to keep on waiting for the changes coming from the state. Why I'm speaking about this city? It's because it's a mediator between our past and our future. It's kind of a Watergate, which passes water and creates, which balances, which makes things common. Things that belong to various levels common, no matter what it is, technological readiness, transformations. The city is the carrier of new practices, new people, and new ideas. The cities and the citizens who are not visible, we should pay attention to them. New Russian citizens is something that brings a lot of optimism to me, even in this hot summer of 2014. That's the heaps of people who are engaged in civic creation. We described 140 civic practices. You can see them on our website, but they are so diverse. You can meet them in your backyard, and new owners of social organization is the self-ruled condominiums and even packing cooperatives, and thanks to the active contribution of dacha and garden cooperatives, that they help for the city to realize that the city is responsible for them. It's also about the juries and city council and two-man city council, or the General Assembly of the city. It's the place when, in the meeting, when people come together and decide a lot of things. It's a cooperative in the city. It's the society of single mothers with cats. And we have such society, or Live a Cat with Us. It's also a society and NGO, families that single mothers who unite in order to raise their children together. It's the civic city control. It's not only blue buckets or ARC supervision. It includes a number of practices. It's the case when motorists check the quality of pavement following the reconstruction, and then on the following day they organize flash mob called Requiem on city roads. It's new media in the city, maps, charts, new sponsors who do not only donate in something that is visible. We have an industry of charity now, and it's the response to the fact that in the middle class of the citizens, we now can see a group of people who are fully prepared to make use of civil service. They say, you know better where to invest, and I have 200 rubles or 2 hours of my time. Tell me where I would better invest it, and people invested in libraries, in vegetarian cafes, in books for rural libraries. They invest in Santa Clauses who come to poor kids, and it's civic art and education, and it's their various shapes. It's the platform of civic. Here it is the traditional education platform, but it also deals with civic streets, pedestrianized, cyclonized streets, and for cyclists only, and streets where people play games. It's new spaces for interaction and networking, so that people would not feel lonely in cities. New clubs, and speaking of some exotic things which I saw, I can just mention, say, intellectual fights named after Sheldon Cooper. That's the game where there are two groups of people who gather in a cafe, and just stage presentation of their research, and people decide whether it is useful or not for them. Live libraries, another option. It's when people carry books saying that I'm a book and I'm a reader too, and so they can tell their stories, and there are some really very horrible stories and very tragic stories telling about people who are homeless, or people like the previous presenter who used to build ABM missile systems, and now he's a sponsor. It's really very civic and city practices. And number three, it relates to a very famous term. It's a place where people can implement themselves and be happy. And it can be, those places can be everything. Can be cafes, bookstores, vegetarian cafes, art schools for parents. And by the way, much has been said about orthodoxy. I do not look like being a friend to Orthodox charity, but I'm a friend to those practices, believe me. And city was suffocating between such because because of the lack of such an institution as the church. And church, most commonly it's an Orthodox church, preferred to act in the schools, institutes, and the armed forces. But following that fire of 2010 that killed dozens of people at a restaurant, we now think that churches can play a role too, and we should really think of that clergy institutions to be helpful to people. I can mention a few more: street art, civic entertainment, street parties, civic festivals, movie clubs, so-called Greek weddings that were very popular last year. Is kind of a theater performance when people come with whatever they have and sit in the street and have a party. And mid-level managers club who realize suddenly that sometime they will die, and in the other world some angel will meet them and ask who they were, and they would say that we were mid-level managers. So they are trying to do something material now. They plant trees, they cultivate flower beds, they repair road signs, and they really act in the city as masters, as owners, offering new services. We have some city actions such as city reading and street reading. I saw, and I was present in some 5 cities at such readings. I was not impressed very much by the quality, but people were very enthusiastic. Romantic song singing, it's also some kind of activity. It's like a transformer box. I mean that picture on the slide that was transformed into a funny creature. It was something that we did in the Perm city, in the city of Perm. Some other options in the downtown, or in the center of the picture, we introduced the Crystal Citizen Award, and it's awarded to those women who made some outstanding act, but it's not profit-based. It's such awards were presented to. This year, that award was presented to a lady who was the head of a village, municipal village, and there was another assistant professor who all of a sudden headed the civic movement to protect parks and forests in the city. There is also the deputy dean of the history school at the university, because he really described very properly what was the historical contribution in the city. City motives, something new. They don't anything about democracy or human rights, but they are about the freedom-containing practices, about responsibility and about democracy. Those practices say that we do exist, and the authorities should learn a lesson when. Otherwise, it's just some trick to counter boring life and an attempt to find an option of one's participation in city democracy. Start with something insignificant now and then. And people who traveled to Europe came back and start doing something typical for Europe. Exchange books in a neighborhood, and it creates a community that continues other practices. They can organize some festivities for kids, so they perform really European practices, living in Vishny, Volochyok, or Terzhok. It's something that shows their negligence to high style. It calls for something that is to be done immediately. It's something to overcome alienation and manifestation of yourself as a live person. Sometimes it's quite a deed, and most of the people are the people who never made plans to come to an organization and do something. But something clicked on their minds, and they began paying attention to social interests, and the exchange of resources is something that they do. And why it is a deed? Well, it means that they descended from the virtual world and became real persons, or they just changed something very important for them. They came out of that tower of the ivory bones and became social and public. Now let's cast a look at the city as a platform. So in reality, the city is a place where we do a lot of so-called it's coexistence, core activities, and we are turning into the cities with more and more communications that made people sustainable and independent, and it's the place where space is also involved in all the processes, what Natalia Zavarechina refers to as Russia 1 and Russia 2. So the modern contemporary city is the place for creative work and chances for success. The only problem is that so far we, as long as we do not keep another thought to that, it's all piecemeal, and people begin thinking of that only when the environment of common interests is created. If we do not take elections seriously, we will be deprived of that space. We still have some innovative city hearings, public hearings, and the question arises how we can unite people, and that's the request to you. Since when you involve people in new practices, we change values, and that brings us to pragmatism, because it's the nearest place for the citizens where you can implement yourself and show that you are useful. It's the attempt to self-implement yourself. It's independence and responsibility for your fate and for your world. And what's most important is the fact that in the city you can make variable use of radical approaches, even if we have to change and everybody shouts you have to change. It's not the advanced party which upgrades a classic picture. It's the support on the existing practices and the rest on existing practices which create a comfort environment. It's very important when around you can see all those extremes. So that's why I'm calling upon you to make this city and to make use of this city the way I'm talking about that, because we should reach those objectives, and I fully agree with Irina Yasina that we will survive. We can quarrel, we can make peace with our neighbors, we can, but anyway, we should live up with them, and those social benefits cannot be created by authorities. That's something that we are withering every time in our city environment. What do we need for that? We need new city literacy. New city literacy is a situation when we understand what the city budget is, how cities are managed and governed, why cities are communication, not just a structure, what is the role of the master plan, town planning, why neighborhoods live different lives in various cities, how much do we pay for new big neighborhoods sleeping in quarters. What is our history, city history? So all put together, it makes up a new city literacy, and we should pay attention to that because it's useful, and there are agents or carriers of that literacy now. Respectively, we need new professionals, and we should really see that there are successful cases that are very useful, and we should see broader consensus around the growing city. Businesses, particular citizens and experts should join the effort and work out a common understanding of the future of the city, whether it is big or small, on two sides of the river, just one bank, and whether we need a single city administration or multiple bodies, and whether we should use our squares for rallies or just for parks. We should really see it that the sustainability and renovation are fashionable, so that reputation of city economy is granted. So we need successful cities, and probably that today is the only chance right now for us to maintain the environment of success in Russia, in the country where a lot of things are happening. It's understand that we face a lot of challenges. Here you have both administrators and experts, but it's related to the environmental environment, and it depends on the practices of that environment. So you cannot innovate things and make changes by destroying the previous heritage. So I think our main concept should be the following. We should bring back the right to be participants of all the changes to our citizens. And even now we have a lot of diversity and variability, and more and more people realize that they are responsible for all those changes in Russia by implementing themselves, by developing themselves, by creating new resources. Come out to the street and bring your future back to you. That's my other slogan. And I would entertain one more idea, and after that we'll switch to Q&A. I think that it's very bad when you keep on being displeased and believe that if your displeasure is expressed in an aesthetic way, it's enough contribution on your part for the future. I think every sensible man believes and realizes that it's necessary to create something special, something that would implement our dreams about the way we are supposed to live, how educated and intellectual we are supposed to be, and far away from the stereotype understanding from entrepreneurship, from town planning, and from because history gave us the only chance, to be successful and interesting. So let us start with ourselves first. Dear colleagues, please get engaged in the discussion. We have half an hour to discuss a very interesting point that our expert presented. Your question, please. I'm Arthur Rodakov from Rostov-on-Don. I have the question about Grigory Melechov. You identified your position as his position, and from your presentation I understood it was the case. But when the society goes to extreme, when it is polarized and the propaganda, strong propaganda contributes to that, it's quite a dangerous way. And I think you would understand what could happen to Grigory Melechov in later times, something that writer Sholokhov didn't describe in his novel. Well, there was a disaster already when Grigory lost his values, or his values were ruined. And similarly, when we say that it's a Oblomov phenomenon, we do not refer to any specific person, and I meant that about Grigory Melechov. I understand how dangerous it is, and I understand that I can be accused of being self-protective, too self-protective, but I don't think it is the case, because first, I'm just like a surrogate. I am standing and look above Ukraine and the Crimea. I keep on thinking about that pendant problems, that we had not done that or this, and Why I'm doing so? Because top stories do not mean that they are the only stories to think of. And the danger is that our wonderful resource can always be turned into something that is counter to people's interests, and it can be turned into the source of spoiled energy and resources. And if you mean that the power does always everything bad, just visit your authorities' information center in Rostov-on-Don. That's the reason I keep on saying that our task, or my task, is that we need to make the choice they make most conscious and well thought. It's the radical centrism, and it means that I realized only too well what I'm doing that for. I'm doing that so that the resources that are badly needed for the country are not wasted. Okay, so let's move on. Finally, there is a question from Armenian side. I need your advice. I'm going to give you a very short story about Armenia. For 4 years now, changes have been undergoing in the legal area in our country, and there are some institutions to be built for the sake of civic society. But we have problems at the personal level, since the citizens of my country do not realize what role they can play in resolving the issues of our country. They are immediately subordinated to all the decisions taken by the government, and they do not think that they can have a role, and they do not think that if they keep silent, they will help government initiate decisions that are unwanted for the people. So my question is how we can change those attitudes, how we can make people be actively involved in the building of the civil society, how we can teach people to gently resolve the problems. You know, it's very surprising since I always believed that Armenia was famous for self-organization, for collective practices. Perhaps they are not aimed at the third sector, at human rights, but again, I don't have any general recipe, but I'm certain that you should maintain and support the centers of growth if they are. And then really people should learn how to interpret their failures as the failures of the civil society. That's one thing. Second thing, when the population is not involved, it doesn't mean that it's not interested or intimidated. I don't think that Armenians are intimidated. They may not just understand that if you try to translate it into popular language, if you try to explain to them what threats are there in their passivity and inaction, perhaps it will help people get involved in the process. And I think there is another important thing. When we invite people for a dialogue, we always believe that we invite those who do not agree, who are the opposition. But if we are serious about our efforts, we should invite everybody, but because those, both winners or losers, are to be involved, and those who understand all out of a sudden that can benefit from their involvement, they can produce a lot of energy, a lot of power. And we are to be supported by even minor success stories and enable people to get involved and translate in the popular language what is required from them. And so that makes it all. I think everything else is available.
My colleague from St. Petersburg. You started with the deliberation about Melikhov and used the word, the term intelligentsia, having emphasized its role in history. Returning to the Vehi collection, intelligentsia was considered in the sense of that we have to depart from the practice of destruction and move on to the practice of creation, if you will. This is what we may consider as the return or the reverting of the urban space to the citizens. Well, I proposed the urban space because I think that the urban space is has the growth points for the horizontal development. But what is to be done in future? All of us have to think in the spirit that a contemporary city, a modern city, can hardly digest the number of conflicts. So it is not about camouflaging the conflicts, because people do become subjects. But if we can try and grow such institutions which would allow people to manage conflicts, what would it be? Medical practices, or what kind of practices were procedures, the forums for both the liberal democratic and the nationalist forces. So I'm talking about the different ways of how we could build up and develop the institutions which would allow in a contemporary city, in a modern city, to resolve conflicts in a peaceful way. And also participate in the so-called administrative reform. And I think that the most important thing is an attempt to find the new texts which would allow people to provide new meaning to the old concepts. Thank you very much. This was a most interesting presentation. I'm from Yaroslavl. I'm usually confronted with the reality that what I'm trying to do in Yaroslavl is just a very petty affairs, and sometimes these petty affairs seem very insignificant to me in the light of the people that we come to meet at the school. So I have a question: at what stage at our civic work should we go about legal incorporation of an NGO? For instance, now for 2 years we're having some sports events, or else we have lectures in the open air or in the cafes. These are quite, they may look or seem as unimportant events, but when I come to the city administration and I ask, please let me do that, and then I'm asked, what organization do you represent? Do you believe there is a certain line upon which people have to start working with the authorities and incorporate? There is a positivist answer. The positivist answer is that you have to go to the civil officer who is either interested by the duties of his office, or else who thinks that it is fashionable. And if you talk about incorporation, on the one hand, you can maximize a partnership, and then you don't necessarily have to have an NGOs. Or else it is not accidental that there is the closed access and the open access state. If we go to the open access societies, then the organizations, the concerns have to survive their founders. And indeed, if you can do something through initiatives, then do that through the initiatives. And finally, there is the resource center. So it is not too bad in Yaroslavl. In any event, whatever you do, you can either unite with others or find a civil servant who is interested. Yes, Anna? Question from Yaroslavl. You have said that you're an optimist. In big cities, it is not too bad, as there are some civic initiatives, there's some interesting events that allow people to develop the civil society in these places. But on the other hand, there are small villages, towns, localities where the situation is quite different. Do you believe there is a way to do what you are doing on a micro level? Well, let me say that not all of our initiatives are successful, but let me remind that in Archangelsk, in Rostov, Myshkin, and Yaroslavl, the initiatives are not. The civic sector does exist. They might speak in different language, or else they might be composed of people who are far removed from the government or from the authorities. But sometimes such civic organizations are made up of several people, and as civic activists, they make up some programs. They do, and even in little towns, we have found some practices. But these practices. And we have. And there was a place where there was no physical culture teacher. So men in this little town decided to teach the kids at school during the sports classes. I think this is an example of a very successful, very successful civic initiative. And unfortunately, our heroes are very archaic, and they can be very imposing success stories. There are also some other stories which are what we would call. Usually these are former trade union leaders. When there's a small initiative group and when there is no club, or else the music is too loud in the cafe, usually there is one lady who says at the end of the meeting, at least let us exchange telephone numbers. These ladies are like headquarters, the headquarters or the walking infrastructure of such civic initiatives. And at every level, there are such people who are trying to improve the life of citizens. Unfortunately, we do not always pay attention to these people. A question from Sochi. I'm from Sochi. I would like to speak about country on the whole. On the 2nd of July, the federal law number 44 was enacted, which stipulates the participation of citizens in the protection of the environment, and the so-called popular militia was revived. Our civic activists in Sochi were quite impressed, and the people who are usually members of such committees are people from the local domiciles, and such support for the popular militia and the legal framework. Do you believe this is a support on the part of the state, or else an attempt to increase the control? Well, I have seen such practices with the people trying to perform the role of militiamen. In some cases, I have seen terrible situation with the Cossacks standing at the electoral station or the voting station. I dislike this situation in the sense that I'm extremely wary about the license to violence. The license to violence in any granted by the state to any third parties. And as a positivist, at the same time, I have to realize that I cannot debate this law or abolish this law. Of course, I'm not going to participate in this as a person, but the one thing that is possible is that the public control law can be superimposed upon this one. We can also try and calculate the costs. But of course, this is the zone of our great scrutiny, because I am very concerned by any private armies or Cossacks corps and the militiamen. And in the Soviet times, I remember the militia, the so-called popular militia, and I am very oppressed by these memories. Yulia from Kaliningrad. Thank you very much, Svetlana. We work in the same field. The ideal situation for the development of an urban space is when there is a combination or a link between the government and the society. Maybe you have some ways to attract the business to civic initiatives. Well, first of all, let me tell you that the business is usually very wary of becoming a milking cow. I was for many years dealing with support of small and mid-size businesses. So if a partner or a business venture believes that they want to be milked, then they would usually decline any participation. What is important, I think, is to try and consider this in a subject, as a subject of dialogue. About 10 years ago, we conducted a seminar for an organization which was called the Association of Female Entrepreneurs of Russia. So there was a number of several ladies, mid-age ladies, who were talking about some psychological problems of of ladies who are the heads of business ventures. So they went for a smoke to the corridor, and then they met another group of smoking ladies who had a gynecological seminar. And it appears that these ladies started to criticize each other. And we understood that there is a problem which needs to be solved. These ladies made peace very soon and started to talk about a common cause about the care for the pregnant women working in the trading association. So they agreed that they would set, and the ladies who were physicians, they agreed to organize a prophylactical treatment. Then they found a special enterprise, a special room, and this is where the actual medical exam took place for these pregnant women. And this is a classical case of a partnership of two groups of ladies. It is always better to find a consensus. But there are cases when you have to adapt yourself to talking. You have to talk about the land use and the construction. And the construction lobby is the strongest city lobby. Svetlana Gennadievna, what you have just said is, I think, a very, very painful question. I'm a journalist at a newspaper, and I have recently written an article and there is a story and decisions should be taken at the level of the state of the city Duma. Then we held a meeting with the deputy mayor, and the deputy mayor said that what you're writing here is not in accordance with the law. The law doesn't say anything about this. Do you believe that there are legal mechanism, any legal mechanism to organize such public-private partnership? Well, indeed, there are the law requirements, the requirements of the law, and they get a concession, and then they recalculate the cost of the land. And there is this discrepancy between the industrial system and to what is required. But this is not necessarily a form of partnership. And these conflicts in the urban space are some of the most bloody, because many of them are delayed. Can you imagine a situation when you are really cutting a tissue across the tissue, and people go to live in a different place and according to a different system, such as in the same way it is terrible to see a situation when the general plan of the city is not confirmed. For instance, let us take the example of Perm, where the general plan was actually eroded. And nobody knows how many buses are required if you need to get all the people to take them to the say that kids to the kindergarten. But let me also tell you that and this is done either in the other times. Why do we talk about the urban space all the time? Maria Gulova from St. Petersburg. Yes, indeed, the general plan is a very difficult story. But I remember you spoke about Perm. I wanted to talk about the problems and the threat of destruction of the Perm 36 museum. Perm 36, a memorial complex on the basis of the former colony of Gulag, which was initially created by the Memorial Society individuals and activists, which then became an NGO, which started to get state financing, and this was taken to the finance, and there were quite a bit of investment into this camp memorial, and at the same time the Pilorama festival took place there. So this was and clearly from some moment several problems started to be conspicuous. First of all, the budget code does not allow to channel such funds, and the state was not particularly interested in retaining these relationships. And then, of course, when the state is acting as a madman, and that if the state has invested into this museum, then it has bought the whole place, and the NGO says, and unfortunately this is indeed the curtailing, or indeed we all have to understand that this is an instance of obliteration of the memory of the Stalin's repressions. But we also decided to have our own Pilorama, and then we'll try to see how can we retain this and preserve this museum. And one of the civil officials held a press conference today who said that museum is good, but because there are so many conflicts, the former veterans, there are many conflicts, we shall make this into we will make this into a museum of industrial coercion and coerced labor, which indeed totally obliterates the idea of the civic initiative. Yesterday, one of the lecturers said that civil society is On the territory of my municipality, there are many civic organizations or NGOs, but they have very hard times to come to agreement. I myself was a leader of an NGO for several years, and an idea of the youth parliament was in the air, as well as an idea of association of NGOs. But once we start talking about some concrete steps, problems arise because the NGOs try to protect their fiefdoms, their little foods, and the little foods spring in the places where compromise seemed to be possible. And even though each of these NGOs seem to be grand and excellent and very fine, but when they come to the table and try to negotiate, it appears that they cannot come to terms. Do you believe that this is a tendency or something that we can see in Russia only? Well, I wouldn't say that this is something that this is something characteristic for Russia only. This is, in our case, in Russia, it is not organized anarchy, of course, but the subject matter of agreement is the most important thing, and the culture of coming to agreement. And there is indeed a culture of conflict resolution. And but in your case, why should the question to be asked is, why should people cooperate? If a leader and organization are the same, then people have to come to terms. And the second thing, we're talking about cooperation, but for cooperation to take place, there has to be an exchange of assets or exchange of resources. If there is no resource or there is no trade-off, then there is a problem, because this is also a matter of the civic culture. Finally, there are cases the bloodiest wars among the NGOs is, interestingly, between the so-called environmental or animal protective NGOs. So why should we agree? Why should we cooperate? If it is just for a matter of cooperation or for the spirit of it, that's one thing. But if there is a subject matter, so the chaotic thing, the chaos is in a way quite normal. Well, my dear friends, unfortunately our time is up for this session, and let me thank our expert, because what she has told us about is both interesting and valuable. Thank you very much.
Всем приятного аппетита.